we want to focus next on the Topspiel, the Saturday fixture between Eintracht Frankfurt and Werder Bremen. We have talked a lot about Eintracht Frankfurt this year and how amazing Omar Marmoush and his story is. Keke is another one. You go up and down that Frankfurt lineup. It's just so much fun. There was quite a few stories about Tuta, the Brazilian defender, and how he's now on the verge of making the Brazilian national team. They do good work there, is what I'm trying to say, right, at Eintracht Frankfurt. And it's being honored. We'd also talked during the international break about their two wingbacks, Collins and Nathaniel Brown, right, and how they're really shining with the U21. Probably going to see them with the senior national teams sooner rather than later as well. So it's great stuff happening. But we also want to talk a little bit about Werder Bremen, who with a win, if the other results go their way, could be entering the European places. And that's not the only good news. Is since COVID, they actually recorded their first profit this year. The AGM, as it's the case for many clubs in the Bundesliga, they hold their AGMs, the annual general meetings, during the second international break. So this November window, right? And they announced a profit for the first time. It's a small profit, 2.2 million euros. But, if you've been losing money, you take it. But they also announced that they increased their revenue from 122 to about 149 million euros. Big part of that is television, but also, and this is a big one because we talked a lot about this in the past with marketing. It's been a good season so far for Werder Bremen, especially when we consider the fact that we kind of were down a little bit on them at the beginning of the year because they didn't really do much in the transfer window. And yet it seems like in retrospect, it was maybe enough.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking before the show, they actually only spent about 6 or 7 million euros in the transfer window, which I think is probably some good context for those kind of financial results. They're obviously gone through a period of kind of pretty strong austerity they've had to kind of endure after COVID. They're not the richest club in Germany by any means, obviously. So, and they're also a club that only just recently returned to the Bundesliga, having spent a long time in this fight Bundesliga. So they're definitely a club still getting back to the kind of levels that they were, 10, 15 years ago. But yeah, they're kind of flying under the radar this season, which is really interesting to watch. I've been kind of impressed to see them kind of go through this impressive record of just kind of still hoping to kind of score goals more than they concede them. If you kind of look, I kind of have their stats open in front of me. There's only like 3 or 4 teams who counterattack more than them this season. There's only a few teams that score more goals than them. They've certainly conceded a lot of goals. I think they actually have the 3rd worst defensive record in the league this year, but that's maybe a little offset by some notable defeats. For example, the 5-0 defeat to Bayern or the 4-1 defeat to Gladbach, makes up more or less half the goals they've conceded this season. But yeah, they've actually got a really impressive away record. They've got the 2nd best away record in the league so far this season. And, as you said, if they were to go on and win this game, they'd only be, 2 points off Frankfurt, who were in 3rd place. And they just kind of keep doing really well. And I think Ole Werner, the head coach, deserves a huge amount of credit here. They've not rebuilt the squad. They've not signed a bunch of wonder kids. They've not, poached players from some rivals like a lot of clubs in Bundesliga do. They've just kind of slowly but surely got better with every single game. And actually, the interesting thing is, if you look at Ole Werner's kind of points per game since they got promoted to Bundesliga, it was 1.06 in their first season back, which is when they finished 13th. There was 1.24 when he finished 9th, and right now it's sitting at 1.5. So it's going up incrementally, and it's not like Union Berlin or a Freiburg or a Leverkusen. It's not the kind of form that's going to make headlines or attract international news, but they are kind of slowly but surely just kind of grinding out results and doing very well. And I just think they deserve a bit of credit because it's quite slow and it's quite, it's not hugely exciting. But as we said, they could finish this match day 11 games into the season, punching for European spots.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, credit where credit is due. They have some really interesting younger players as well, right? Keke is one that got a lot of early appraisal, and I think he needs to still kind of show it, but it Justin Nenschma, who didn't have quite the impact yet than he had last season, but we know what he can do. Romano Schmid is a super interesting player, attacking midfielder, Austrian, right? Mitchell Weiser, who was hoping to play for Algeria during this international break, but that didn't quite pan out, and we'll see if that's gonna pan out. But he's a really, really good player. A player who I think if he was, I wouldn't be surprised if he'd be a national team player for Algeria soon, because he's always he's just not quite good enough to play for Germany. Let's say it that way. But is definitely a very good Bundesliga player. And then I really like their goalkeeper, etc. I think he's a really, 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 really solid shot stopper. And that is difficult to be in Bremen because, ever since I followed the Bundesliga, Werder Bremen have been the team that's always a kind of outscored their problems. That is the way they play football. There's something really great about that too. I remember when they won the Bundesliga title. Oh my God, when was that? 2005? A long time ago. I mean, it was 2006, 2007. Anyways, it's a long time ago, but they played fantastic football that year. And, that has always been their hallmark. And I think, too, we have to remember where they came from. As you said, they were relegated to the second division. They made their way back up. And they used to be one of the biggest clubs in German football, right? They used to be Bayern Munich's challenger. And we've seen with some other teams, once you drop down to that second division, how incredibly difficult it can be to come back from that. You look, the team that was relegated with them, Schalke, has been since relegated again, and is currently looking down the barrel of possibly relegation to the third division. So, this is not a given. You can be a giant of German football, and you can go down there, and you can never come back. And I think in the context of all that, we really have to praise them for what they've done on and off the field. And yes, that means if they'd done it with austerity and it isn't sexy on the transfer window and then gets criticized by people like us, okay, well, and then, they prove us wrong. Yeah, fair enough. I'll eat my words, Stefan.
Yeah, I mean, stability is the key word, isn't it? That's the key thing. And they've got that in Ole Werner. He's proved to be a good Bundesliga head coach. And he's proved to be the one thing that every Bundesliga team dreams of and that's a head coach who gets the best out of the players that he has to hand. It's not about spending money. It's not about scouting the best players. It's about making sure every player he has does tremendously well. And I think the thing that really stands out to me about them as well is the way that they play. Is they score a lot of goals late on in games, but they also score a lot of goals from a lot of positions. A few years ago, obviously, they had Niklas Füllkrug, who was obviously their talisman, and he was the guy who scored all the goals for them. It was very straightforward. They were this kind of fun, exciting, attacking team who flew down the wings. Mitchell Weiser swung the ball to the box. Niklas Füllkrug, headed it home, 3 points or whatever. Thank you very much. And it was pretty straightforward, but they've definitely had to adapt. They've still got Marvin Ducksch, who's fantastic kind of forward, who's got a lot of kind of strings to his bow. But as you said, Keke Top, the striker they signed from Schalke, I'd be really interested to keep an eye on him in this weekend, actually, because he's got a goal and an assist in his last 2 games before the international break. But they've just got a lot of other players who score goals, like Jens Stagger, the central midfielder. He's chipping in with goals this season. Oliver Burke, the Scotland international. Well, I don't know if he can't remember the last time he played for Scotland, but he and like maybe 3 or 4 other players continue to just kind of come on late on in matches and cause trouble. If you're a mid-table team, I think that's so much healthier to have so many different options and routes to goal rather than just relying on one big striker. Because we've kind of seen that with a lot of clubs up and down the league, really, to be honest with you, where they have one player when they come in and out of form, things can really kind of fall apart. And actually, maybe a good example, that's Heidenheim, who obviously lost Kleindienst last season as their kind of big man up front. They've had to completely rebuild their own forward line. So yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, can they go to Frankfurt and win that game? It's a huge ask, and I think it is worth bearing in mind that as good as Bremen have been this season, they have been on the end of some big thumpings. As I said, they unexpectedly lost 4-1 to Gladbach. But then, of course, there was that 5-0 defeat to Bayern, which I actually thought was probably the most depressing performance I've ever seen of a single team this season, to be honest with you. So it's not all sunshine and rainbows by any means, but they do know how to get stuck in. They know how to put in good performances, particularly away from home. And I would be surprised if they cause an upset this weekend.
It'd be a really fun game to watch, I think. And it's a top spiel too. Maybe not in the context of international watchers who don't quite understand what these two clubs represent, but these are two really big clubs in German football. People turn on the TV to watch Werder Bremen. People turn on the TV to watch Eintracht Frankfurt. I think that's really important to bear in mind here when you turn this game on. There is historic significance or historic weight behind, not significant weight behind these two clubs. So I'm literally looking forward to watching this game and all the other Bundesliga games this weekend. And I think too, Ole Werner, he's only 36, Stefan. Maybe this is someone, if he was at one of these other big clubs as a 36-year-old, I think we would be talking a lot more about him. He's one to watch as well going down the road. So yeah,